Hey everyone, Angela here with Energy Intuit. I'm coming to you today with two psychic development tips. So, first of all, who am I? Angela Bixby. I have been a psychic medium for the last 15 years. This is the second career for me. And my passion is to teach people to connect to their intuition. So I'm bringing you two tips today for psychic development for you to work with your skills. So many humans on the planet are spontaneously, much more so awakening, realizing that they're having psychic experiences. And so this video in this playlist of psychic development videos is intended to support you on your journey because perhaps utilizing a couple of these tips and tricks might be all that you need to continue furthering and evolving your psychic development journey. One more thing that I'd like to say before I jump into the two tips are, and the two tips are going to be asking questions, engaging with questions, and vetting by dimension. That is how I'm oriented as I vet by dimension. So while I'm a psychic medium, consciousness mentor, intuitive channel, I like to teach psychic development in a very holistic way, in a very empowering way. And so I teach people that we can be directive with these skills. I'm not sure where it all came about decades ago, 120, 130 years ago when there was a huge resurgence around spiritualism in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it was brought from the UK over to America, which is where I reside. And the Fox sisters were famous at that time for being part of that whole movement. At that time, there was a lot of dramatic effect that came into seances. There would be table rapping. People would be hearing knocking. People would be in a cabinet and they would hear that same kind of thing, or it would shake, or ectoplasm would be physical evidence left after a seance. All of these things were rather dramatic and large. It is said that the consciousness on the planet required that much sort of drama to really believe that there was life after this dimension and this realm and this existence that we have. Fast forward to today. And we don't need that level of drama and theatrics with all of this. And so many people are having spontaneous experiences. For instance, driving by someone and getting a thought loop as if they're picking up the person's thoughts, and they are, being out shopping and hearing someone having thoughts about what's on their list, and then the person kind of double checking their own list, thinking these aren't things aren't on my list that I'm hearing listed in my head. Having knowings, being able to sense feelings of people, emotions of people. There's so many different ways that our psychic skills express. So you may be experiencing those and or any of these. And by simply engaging with these couple of practices, as I said earlier, it might help you to continue to evolve your psychic development journey. We get more of what we focus upon. Quantum physics teaches us that. And so the more that you do work on your psychic skills, the more that you will evolve them. It's really that simple. Okay, now for the two tips. Number one, questions generate psychic messages. So if you are sitting in a grounded, meditative state, it's a matter of you posing a question, whether you choose to write it down and perhaps do automatic writing with a spirit guide or an energy from a different dimension, or whether you are asking questions telepathically in your head during meditation of your guides or stating it aloud. Really, you can engage with the questions in any way, and you can simply think them. That's what most of my students do in the context of our development work is they think the questions and they interact with their guides. It's what I do in a session with clients is I'll ask a bunch of questions in my head of spirit, and then they'll bring through images and answers and psychic responses. So you want to be engaging with questions. So you can start with a question. You can just sort of tee up your meditation with, I'm going in with this inquiry today. And perhaps it looks something like, what is in my highest good to accomplish today, right? It's something kind of open but kind of closed. Or it could be spirit, can you show me a message that'll uplift me for today, which is really open-ended. Whether it's sort of more closed or specific, you can also ask yes and no questions. And if you don't have a strong way of knowing how your psychic skills or your guides are answering you, I say start with yes and no questions. And so you would start with it being more closed, with closed-ended questions of either yes or no. And so as you ask questions, you can generate psychic messages that way, psychic images that way, if you're someone that's seeing or perceiving in that way. And there are so many ways to perceive. And then you can also ask questions within your experience. So if you're already sort of in a meditation, opening up to information coming through from spirit, engage with it. If you're seeing or hearing something, so for instance, if you're hearing a bell ringing in your left ear, a question might be, oh, spirit, is that to tell me something's coming? Or, oh, spirit, is that a message of confirmation? Or, oh, spirit, is that an indication that I'll be hearing church bells soon, right? Because it can mean so many different things. You want to ask questions when you're in the experience of your guides. Guides, help me clarify what's going on here. Can you bring in more information around the bell, right? And then you might feel or sense it's about someone that you know personally that's going to get married or about to get engaged, etc. So either asking questions as a way to tee up your experience in meditation with your guides or your session with your guides when you're going into session, whether you might be speaking with them, you might be vocal channeling, you might be writing, or really just doing the telepathic thing. So asking questions that way, and then asking questions within your process to further the message is what I recommend. A lot of people really sit with this sort of and I think there was a lot of fear that was brought in the early spiritualist movement based on where we were culturally with religion, right? A lot of people really still carried over from religion that they would only hear from spirit if they were sort of spiritually touched. And so there's always been this I believe it's a reverence, but it also has always felt like a fear to me because when I encourage people to ask questions within their process, sometimes they're shocked. It never occurs to them that they can engage and interact with spirit in these ways. And so I say, always remember to ask questions, whether you're teeing up an inquiry or asking questions of an existing message that you're in with your skills. The second process that I teach my students, and I deem this is very important. I don't know anybody else that teaches this way, but this is very, very important to me. Okay, I'm going to talk about dimensions. I'm not going to get into the definition per se and the physics definition. I am talking about metaphysical dimensions that they stem from physical dimensions, right? Metaphysics and physics really meet in the quantum physics area. There are lots of definitions of dimensions out there. Some avenues of theoretical physics, i.e., from string theory, there are a lot of different theories that go around. Some people believe there's 7 dimensions, some nine, some 11, some 13, right? There's a lot of discrepancy with the scientists on exactly how many dimensions there are. And then spiritually and metaphysically, for instance, Barbara Hand Clow, which I love her as a spiritual teacher and mentor, she works with the alchemy of 9 dimensions for planet Earth as it was channeled to her from the Pleiadians a long time ago. It's not her saying there are only 9 dimensions, it's that she's working within that belief system and offering the teaching from there. There are others that say there are 12 around the Earth. And what I would say to you from my experience is there are a limitless number of dimensions. The other piece that comes into this conversation about dimensions is you'll hear a lot of people, especially here on YouTube, a lot of people that the information they get from their guides and the downloads that they receive and the knowings that they have talk about specificity of dimensions with also having densities within dimensions. And so I don't go into that much detail with my guides. The way that my guides work with me really just uses the dimensions. The third dimension is the one that we're living in right now, that our bodies exist in. Fourth dimension being what I call the dirty dimension. It's where psychic messages happen. It's where a lot of the lower frequencied galactics and also lower frequencied energies that tend to get into like world leaders and things tend to come from the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is still rife with dualism and ego and, black, white, right, wrong, those kinds of things. The fifth dimension is the sweet spot. And I recommend that people only talk to energies from the fifth dimension and above, as we would know it numerically, right? So fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. Because when you hit the fifth dimension, you are in a lot more unity consciousness. Ego, there's a lot less ego there. The guides that you work with there are going to be very, very loving and more higher vibrational. Sixth dimension is a very solid dimension to work with. If you're just wanting to connect to some new guides or ascended masters, I say intend that you're connecting with sixth dimensional guides. That's where the archangels hang out. That's where the ascended masters hang out. It's a very, very solid dimension. There's very little riffraff there. And so I recommend that people go there, start there, or stick with that dimension if that feels right for you. When we connect with passed on loved ones, my knowing again from what spirit has taught me and my experiences over the last 15 years is that when humans pass on, their soul goes to sort of higher echelons of the third dimension or lower echelons of the fourth dimension. They're not necessarily, and very rarely, all of them going in a way that we can connect them here on earth, going all the way to like that higher dimensional light and God light. When that happens, we still experience passed on loved ones through mediumship reading as closer to this dimension and more in tune with the frequency that we can perceive. Okay. So even though passed on loved ones go to generally the at higher echelons of the third dimension and lower echelons or densities of the fourth dimension, even if they're in a higher fifth dimension, like I said, we perceive spirit based upon our capacity and our frequency for consciousness. So if your consciousness isn't at a frequency that's able to perceive that higher version of that passed on loved one, you're just not going to experience them that way. And it's just rare to experience passed on loved ones in that way. I'm saying that from experience from doing 20,000 some readings over the last 15 years. Um, and then, spirit guides are just they're doing what they're doing intentionally on the other side. And so they're in sort of, especially fifth dimension and above, kind of like a cleaner capacity, and they're more of service to us in a heart-centered way and a more neutral and uplifted way as tied to frequency, right? So it all comes down to frequency. Again, you can intend that you're calling in guides from the fifth or sixth dimension or above. And when they show up, or when an energy shows up, or when you're having a psychic experience, you want to say telepathically, what dimension are you from? I discourage all of you from talking to people if they don't give you a dimension, if they don't answer right away, or if you don't hear fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. If they give you two dimensions, that's shady. It should be solid. What dimension are you from is the question you're asking, and you should hear it instantly. You should receive it instantly, fifth, or know what that feeling feels like. If you don't do that, there can be shapeshifter and trickster guides that can come in and kind of wreak havoc with one's process, perhaps bring in bad information. So I strongly recommend that people vet any energies they're talking to in the unseen realms and be sure that they're from the fifth dimension or above. Because, when you get in the lower dimensions, when you get in fourth dimension, especially, that's where you get some of the icky spirits, I'll just leave it at that. There are a lot of guides that come through to me from the second dimension. It's a subterranean dimension, kind of underneath the earth. And that's not a bad dimension to talk to either, but I just don't recommend that people start there. If you have been on a journey for a while and you're evolving and you've been working with fifth and sixth dimensional guides and calling them in, and then all of a sudden you have guides or new councils show up and you say, what dimension are you from? And they say two. It's okay if you choose to talk to them. I would ask them what their purpose for coming through to you is, because I don't know that they come through to that many people, but they present it to me because I teach in this realm and I do this work and I teach this work specifically. And that dimension is a lot about some of the pre-structures from kind of more of an earth standpoint for how systems and things are created on our planet. We also create in the fifth dimension and above from love and light and those structures, but these 2D structures are different than the 5D is the best way that I can say it. So when you're engaging with an unseen energy, entity, any of it, you want to develop the habit right away and cement in that neural network in your brain by continuing to do it, repeating it. Ask, what dimension are you from? And then if they don't give you a dimension, or they sort of fumble, or they give you two dimensions, or they say fourth or third, you say, no, thank you, go away. You have every right to tell an energy that doesn't feel right to you to go away. You do not have to engage with it just because it shows up. I like to give the analogy of, think about if you were at home and you opened up your windows. At least here in the US where I live, we don't open up our screens. We leave screens on our windows. If we open them up, all the birds and the bugs would fly into our house. So think about that analogy with the screen for your own spiritual process. It gets really exciting when you realize that you're talking to the unseen realms and you're connecting with either past on loved ones or spirit guides or energies and entities that are in the unseen realms. And I do not want you guys to get into a weird situation. And so remember to ask questions. Remember that you can be directive and you say whether you want to talk to them or not, and vet by dimension and only talk to the fifth dimension or above, please, just for your own safety and sake and soul's sake. All right, this has been a quick psychic development tutorial with 2 points of interest for you all from myself. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day, and give another video a listen if you'd like to learn a bit more about your psychic development process. Bye for now. Thank you.